The suit was a cage. Not a gilded one, but a bespoke, charcoal grey cage tailored to my exact dimensions. Every time I shifted my weight, the fine Italian wool whispered against my skin, a constant reminder of the performance I was about to give. The knot in my stomach was tighter than the silk tie. Alex was currently trying to fix for the third time. "Breathe, Brad," he said, his voice a low, familiar rumble that had anchored me for 15 years. His knuckles brushed against my throat, and an involuntary shiver traced its way down my spine. I tried to disguise it as a nervous twitch. I was getting very good at disguising things. Easy for you to say. I managed, my eyes fixed on his. In the antique mirror of the church's antechamber, we were a portrait of tradition, the groom and his best man. Two sides of the same coin. He was the calm to my chaos, the steady hand to my tremor. You're not the one about to chain yourself to another human being for the rest of your life. Alex's hand stilled on the knot. His gaze in the mirror was intense, searching. It was a look I knew better than my own reflection. It was the look he'd given me the night my dad died. The one he'd had when I got my acceptance letter to law school. And the one he wore the first time I told him I was serious about Sarah. It was a look that said, "I'm here, but are you sure about this?" He never said the words, of course. He was too good a friend for that. Too loyal. "It's not a chain, man. It's a partnership," he said, finally perfecting the dimple in the tie. He smoothed down my lapels, his hands lingering a fraction of a second long on my shoulders. "And you love Sarah." "I know you do." I did love Sarah. That was the cruelest part of the whole charade. I loved her optimism, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed, the fierce intelligence she hid behind a deceptively gentle demeanor. She was kind and good and beautiful, and she deserved a man who could love her completely, without reservation, a man whose heart didn't clench into a painful fist. Every time his best friend's hand brushed his neck, "Yeah," I said, the word feeling hollow and thin in the stuffy room. "I know." He gave my shoulders a final, firm squeeze and stepped back, breaking the magnetic pull between us. The air rushed back into my lungs. He looked me up and down, a genuine, warm smile finally reaching his eyes. He was devastatingly handsome, even more so now in his perfectly fitted suit. His dark hair was cut sharp, his jawline was a study in angles, and his blue eyes, usually so full of humor, held a depth that could drown a man. I had spent a decade and a half learning to swim in those depths, and now I was willingly walking onto dry land. "Well, you clean up good, Bradley," he quipped, falling back into our easy banter. It was our safe space, the well-worn path of jokes and jabs that kept us from straying into more dangerous territory. "Sarah's not gonna know what hit her." "That's the plan," I replied, forcing a grin. "Dazzle her into a state of temporary insanity so she actually says I do." He laughed, a real, throaty sound that made the knot in my stomach loosen for a moment before reforming, heavier this time. He moved to the small table in the corner and picked up a silver flask. Unscrewing the cap, he poured a small measure of amber liquid into 2 shot glasses he'd brought. A little something for the nerves. A 12-year-old Macallan. Our tradition. It had started back in college, the night before our final exams. We were cramming in the library, fueled by cheap coffee and panic. Alex had disappeared for 20 minutes and returned, with a flask of his dad's good stuff, for clarity and courage, he'd said. We'd sipped it in the hushed silence of the history stacks, the warmth spreading through our chests, making the impossible seem possible. We'd aced the exams. Ever since, we'd marked every major milestone with a shot from that flask. Graduations, new jobs, birthdays, and now my wedding day. A milestone that felt more like a tombstone. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. It was like a static shock, a tiny jolt that I felt all the way to my core. I wondered if he felt it too, or if it was just me. It was always just me. To Sarah and Brad, he said, raising his glass, to a long and happy life. My hand trembled slightly as I raised my own. To Sarah and Brad, I echoed, my voice thick. The lie tasted like ash on my tongue, even. Before the whiskey hit, we drank, the smoky peat of the scotch burning a clean line down my throat. A welcome, clarifying pain. It was the only honest thing I'd felt all day. I set the empty glass down. The clink unnaturally loud in the silence. The distant, muffled sound of an organ starting to practice a hymn drifted through the heavy oak door. It was almost time. Remember that time in Yosemite? I asked suddenly, the memory surfacing unbidden. A drowning man grasping for a life raft. Alex's brow furrowed for a second, then cleared. A slow smile spread across his face. When you tried to impress those hikers from Sweden by climbing that rock face and ended up dangling from a branch like a half-drowned cat? I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine laugh this time. I wouldn't say dangling. It was a controlled descent. Your shoe fell off and almost took out a squirrel. I had to talk a park ranger out of citing you for reckless stupidity. He shot back, his eyes dancing with the memory. You owed me for that one. I paid you back by carrying the tent the rest of the way after you sprained your ankle. Trying to jump that creek. A calculated risk. We fell silent, both lost in the memory. It was the third day of a week-long trip the summer after graduation. That night, huddled around a campfire under a blanket of stars so thick it felt like you could touch them. The air had been different. The easy camaraderie had shifted into something quieter, more charged. We'd been talking about the future, about jobs and cities, and the terrifying uncertainty of it all. At one point, he'd looked at me, the firelight catching the gold flecks in his eyes, and said, "Whatever happens will be all right, as long as we've got each other." I'd wanted to kiss him then. The urge was so overwhelming, so primal, it had stolen the air from my lungs. I imagined leaning across the small space between us, closing the distance, and finally answering the question that had been humming beneath the surface of our friendship for years. But I didn't. I panicked. I clapped him on the back, made a joke about us being a sappy old married couple, and changed the subject. The moment passed. The tension dissipated, and we went back to being Brad and Alex, the inseparable duo, the platonic ideal of male friendship. And in that moment of cowardice, I had set the course for the rest of my life. A course that led directly to this stuffy room, this suffocating suit, and a woman I loved but was not in love with. A soft knock on the door jolted me back to the present. My mom peeked her head in, her face a carefully constructed mask of maternal pride and barely contained tears. "It's time, sweetheart," she whispered, her eyes shining. She looked at Alex and smiled. "Thank you for taking care of him, Alex. You've always been such a good friend." "Always, Mrs. Peterson," Alex said, his voice steady as a rock. He met my eyes one last time. "Are you ready for this, man?" I wasn't. I would never be. But I nodded anyway. I gave my reflection one last look. The man staring back was a stranger, a well-dressed actor about to step onto the biggest stage of his life. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His best man was standing behind him, a silent, supportive shadow. But the shadow was where the real story was. The real love. The real heartbreak. I walked out of the room, Alex a step behind me. The organ music swelled, a triumphant, deafening roar. The heavy scent of lilies and old wood filled the air. The nave was packed, a sea of expectant faces all turned towards me. They saw a happy groom, a man on the precipice of his perfect life. They didn't see the gaping chasm inside me. I took my place at the altar, my feet feeling like lead. Alex stood beside me, his presence a warm, solid weight. I could feel his gaze on me, but I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, I would break. And then the music changed. The wedding march. The great wooden doors at the back of the church swung open, and there she was, Sarah, a vision in white, her face radiant, her eyes locked on me. A wave of genuine affection washed over me, mingled with a nauseating surge of guilt. She was so beautiful, so full of hope. She was walking toward a lie, and she didn't even know it. My eyes, of their own volition, flickered to Alex. He was already looking at me, and in that fleeting, stolen glance, I saw it all. The shared history, the unspoken longing, the profound sadness, and a love so deep it ached. It was a look of quiet resignation, of letting go. He was giving me away. My bride was walking towards me, her future in her eyes. But my heart was already standing at the altar beside me, and he was about to watch me promise it to someone else. Sarah reached the altar, her hand slipping into mine. It was small and warm, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had taken root in my chest. She squeezed my fingers, her smile a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. I was a destination, the end of her walk. For me, it felt like the edge of a cliff. I squeezed back, praying the tremor in my hand wasn't noticeable. The minister, a kind-faced man with laugh lines around his eyes, began to speak. His words about love, commitment, and union washed over me, a meaningless drone. My entire consciousness was focused onto things, the radiant face of the woman I was about to betray, and the silent, solid presence of the man standing to my left. I could feel Alex's stillness, a gravitational pull I had to actively resist turning towards. He was close enough that I could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, a scent that was as familiar to me as my own. It was the scent of late-night study sessions, celebratory beers, and quiet condolences. Today, it smelled like goodbye. Do you, Bradley Peterson, take this woman, Sarah Collins, to be your lawfully wedded wife? The world narrowed to that single question. The sea of faces, the scent of lilies, the organ music, it all faded away. There was only the minister's expectant face, Sarah's hopeful eyes, and the ghost of a future I'd murdered in a moment of cowardice around a campfire years ago. This was it. The final nail. My throat was dry. I could feel Alex shift his weight beside me, a minute movement that felt like a seismic event. He was holding his breath. Was he waiting for me to say no, to bolt, to finally? For once in my life, be honest, the fantasy was so vivid, so intoxicating, I almost choked on it. I love someone else. The words were there, right on the tip of my tongue. I could see the shock on Sarah's face, the confusion in the crowd, the dawning, terrified hope in Alex's eyes. But I was a coward. I had always been a coward. I do, I said. The words came out clear and steady, a testament to the actor I had become. A collective, happy sigh rippled through the church. Sarah's grip on my hands tightened, her relief palpable. Beside me, I heard Alex exhale slowly, a sound of finality, of a door being softly but irrevocably closed. I didn't dare look at him, when it was Sarah's turn. Her I do was a song, bright and confident and full of a certainty I would never know. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. I turned to Sarah. Her eyes were shimmering with tears of joy. She was exquisite. This should have been the happiest moment of my life. I leaned in, cupping her face in my hands, and kissed her. Her lips were soft, yielding. It was a good kiss. It was a kind kiss. But it was like listening to a beautiful piece of music through a thick wall of glass. I could appreciate its technical perfection, but I couldn't feel the vibrations in my soul. My body was at the altar, but my heart was still standing a few feet away, watching. We turned to face the crowd, our hands linked. The applause was thunderous. I smiled, a wide, convincing grin I'd practiced in the mirror. I was Brad Peterson, the happy groom, the loving husband. We walked down the aisle, a triumphant retreat from the truth. Every smiling face was a judgment, every cheer a condemnation. I caught my mom's eye. She was weeping with joy. I saw Sarah's father, beaming with pride. They saw a perfect picture. They didn't see the cracks in the canvas. The reception was a blur of noise and light, a whirlwind of champagne, clinking glasses, and congratulatory hugs from people whose names I barely registered. I was on autopilot, a marionette of social grace, smile, nod, thank you for coming. Yes, she's beautiful. Yes, I'm the luckiest man alive. Each platitude was another small cut. Our first dance was to a soft, acoustic version of a song Sarah loved. I held her close, my hand on the small of her back, and guided her across the floor. She rested her head on my shoulder, humming along. "I'm so happy, Brad," she whispered, her voice muffled by my suit jacket. "I can't believe this is real." "Me neither," I said, and for once, it was the unvarnished truth. I looked over her shoulder, my gaze sweeping the room. I found him, instantly. Alex was standing near the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey, watching us. There was no smile on his face, just a quiet, unreadable intensity. Our eyes met for a long second across the dance floor. In his gaze, I didn't see jealousy or anger. I saw a profound, weary sadness that mirrored my own. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if to say, "You're doing okay. Keep going." Then he looked away, breaking the connection, and started talking to one of Sarah's cousins. The ache in my chest was so sharp, so physical, I almost faltered. I pulled Sarah a little closer, burying my face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her perfume and hairspray. I was using her as a shield against my own heart. The guilt was a physical sickness. Then came the toasts. Sarah's maid of honor. Her sister gave a sweet, tearful speech full of childhood memories. Then Sarah's father, who spoke of welcoming me into the family. And then it was Alex's turn. A hush fell over the room as he walked to the microphone, his movements fluid and confident. He looked impossibly handsome, a dark figure against the warm, celebratory lights of the reception hall. He tapped the mic, a small smile playing on his lips. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex, and I've had the honor of being Brad's best friend for the last 15 years. He started with the usual jokes, a story about our disastrous first attempt at building IKEA furniture in our college dorm, a jab at my questionable taste in music in the early 2000s. The room laughed. Sarah laughed, her hand finding mine under the table. I just watched him, my stomach in knots. But seriously, he continued, his tone shifting. The easy humor receded, replaced by something deeper. Friendship is a strange and powerful thing. You meet someone and you just click. You find a person who gets your stupid jokes, who knows what you're thinking without you having to say a word, who you can call at 3 a.m. just because you need to talk. Brad is that person for me. He paused, his eyes finding mine across the room. The crowd faded away. It was just him and me. I've seen Brad at his best, and I've seen him at his worst. I've seen him celebrate his greatest triumphs, and I've seen him navigate his deepest griefs. And through it all, the one constant has been his loyalty, his integrity. Brad is the most decent man I know. His voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It sounded like pride, but it felt like a eulogy. He then turned his attention to Sarah, and then he met Sarah, and for the first time I saw a new kind of light in him. Sarah, you make him better. You make him happier. You've brought a joy into his life that is a beautiful thing to witness. The words were perfect, polished, exactly what a best man should say. But I knew him. I knew the infinitesimal hesitation before he said happier. I knew the way he held himself, a little too stiffly, a little too formally. He was performing, just like I was. There's a quote. He said, his gaze returning to me, locking me in place. It says that a true friend is someone who is happy for your happiness. And Brad, my friend, my brother, I am so happy for you today. He raised his glass, so please, everyone, join me in a toast to Brad and Sarah, to a lifetime of love, laughter, and happiness. May your love be as strong and as enduring as your friendship. The final word hung in the air between us, friendship. He defined our entire world in that single word, gift-wrapped it, and presented it to a room of 200 people. He had honored me and erased us at the same time. It was the kindest, most brutal thing anyone had ever done to me. The room erupted in cheers of to Brad and Sarah. I raised my glass, my smile feeling like a plaster mask that was cracking. At the edges, I drank the champagne, but it tasted like seawater later. As the party was winding down and the band was playing its last few songs, I found myself needing air. I slipped out a side door onto a small stone patio overlooking the venue's gardens. The cool night air was a relief. I leaned against the stone balustrade, loosening the tie that had felt like a noose all day, and finally allowed my face to fall. The happy groom vanished, leaving just Brad. A hollowed-out man shrouded in charcoal grey wool. The door opened behind me. I didn't have to turn around. The best man's speech of the year. I said quietly, my voice raspy, "You should do this professionally." Alex came to stand beside me, not too close, leaving a respectable, unbridgeable gap between us. Just said what needed to be said. We stood in silence for a long time, listening to the crickets and the muffled bass from the party inside. This was our language. The comfortable silence that had once been full of understanding now felt heavy with everything we couldn't say. "You okay?" he finally asked, his voice low. "I'm married," I said, the word tasting foreign and strange. It wasn't an answer, but it was the only one I had. He nodded, staring out into the darkness. "Yeah, you are." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the silver flask. He unscrewed the cap and handed it to me. "One for the road." I took it without a word and drank, the whiskey a familiar burn. I passed it back to him and he took a long swallow. "She's a great girl, Brad," he said, his voice soft. "Be good to her. She deserves it." "I know," I whispered. He put the flask away. "Well, I should let you get back to your wife." The word "your" was a tiny, sharp jab. He clapped me on the shoulder, a familiar, brotherly gesture that felt completely alien. It was the gesture of a best man, not of Alex. It was a beautiful wedding, man, really. He turned to leave. My entire being screamed for him to stay. "Don't go. Don't leave me here." But I just stood there, paralyzed. He paused at the door. "Hey, Brad, yeah." He looked back at me, his face half in shadow, half in the warm light spilling from the doorway. "For what it's worth," he said, and his voice was so quiet I barely heard it, "I'm proud of you." And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in the dark with the weight of his pride, which felt heavier than any shame I had ever known. The honeymoon was a carefully curated illusion. We went to Maui, a destination chosen from a glossy brochure that promised paradise. And it was, in a way. The sunsets bled across the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink. The air was thick with the scent of plumeria, and the sound of the ocean was a constant, soothing hush. It was a postcard, and we were the smiling figures in the foreground. Sarah was blissfully happy. She threw herself into the experience with an infectious enthusiasm that I both admired and envied. She wanted to do everything: snorkeling in Milokini, driving the winding road to Hana, attending a traditional luau. I went along with it all, a willing participant in her joy. I smiled for the countless photos she took, my arm wrapped around her waist, the brilliant blue of the Pacific serving as a backdrop to our lie. I held her hand as we walked along the beach, listened as she pointed out constellations in the clear night sky, and made love to her in our sprawling hotel suite with the sound of the waves crashing just beyond our balcony. In those moments of physical intimacy, I could almost convince myself. I could focus on the softness of her skin, the scent of her hair, the genuine pleasure in her sighs. I should perform the role of a devoted new husband, and the performance was convincing enough that sometimes, for a few fleeting seconds, even I believed it. But afterward, as she slept peacefully in my arms, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. The echo of my own emptiness a roar in the quiet room. The guilt was a physical presence, a third person in our marriage bed. I was a thief stealing her happiness, her trust, her future. The most difficult moments were the quiet ones, the times we'd sit on the balcony with our morning coffee, the comfortable silences that couples are supposed to share. For us, they were fraught with my internal monologue. I'd watch her gaze out at the ocean, a serene smile on her face, and I'd wonder what she was thinking. Was she replaying our wedding, planning our future? Did she have any idea that the man sitting beside her was a universe away? His thoughts tangled up in a dark-haired, blue-eyed ghost. One morning she caught me staring. "What is it?" she asked, her head tilted curiously. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking how lucky I am." She smiled back, her eyes shining. "Me too." She reached across the small table and took my hand. "I was just thinking about Alex's speech. It was so beautiful, wasn't it? The way he talks about you. You two have such a special bond." The casual mention of his name was like a stone dropped into a still pond, the ripples disrupting my carefully constructed calm. "Yeah," I managed, my voice tight. "He's the best. He is." She agreed. "You know, he actually called yesterday while you were in the shower. Just wanted to make sure we got here okay and were having a good time. He's so thoughtful." My heart hammered against my ribs. He'd called. He'd spoken to her. The thought of their voices connecting across thousands of miles with me as the silent, clueless subject sent a bizarre and unwelcome jolt of something through me. Jealousy? No, that wasn't right. It was a feeling of being on the outside of my own life, of being a topic of conversation between the two most important people in it. "That's nice of him," I said, withdrawing my hand to take a sip of coffee, the cup a shield to hide behind. For the rest of the day, I was haunted. What did they talk about? What was the tone of his voice? Did he ask about me? The questions circled in my head, a relentless swarm. I was a husband on his honeymoon, and I was obsessing over a phone call from my best man. The absurdity, the sheer wrongness of it all was suffocating. When we returned to reality, our new two-bedroom apartment in the city, the neatly stacked wedding gifts, the thank you cards waiting to be written, the performance had to evolve. The grand stage of the wedding and honeymoon was dismantled, replaced by the intimate theater of domestic life. This was harder. There were no exotic distractions, no tourist activities to fill the silences. There was just the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the shared space of a closet, the nightly ritual of brushing our teeth side by side at the bathroom sink. Sarah nested. She turned our apartment into a home with a ruthless efficiency I found both impressive and terrifying. She arranged our books on the shelves, hung photos on the walls, laughing selfies from our honeymoon, a formal portrait from the wedding. The one that always caught my eye was the official group shot, me and Sarah in the Santa, flanked by her bridesmaids and my groomsmen, and there he was, standing right next to me. Alex. He was smiling, a perfect, socially acceptable smile, but his eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at me. No one else would ever notice it, but I saw it every time I walked down the hallway. It was a silent accusation, a quiet reminder. We settled into a routine. We had dinner together most nights. We'd talk about our days, her work as a graphic designer, my cases at the law firm. We'd watch movies on the couch, her feet tucked under my leg. We hosted dinner parties. We were, by all accounts, a model couple. Young, successful, in love. We were the couple our friends wanted to be. Alex was a constant, peripheral presence. He and I fell back into our old rhythm, but with a new, unspoken boundary line drawn between us. We still got drinks after work, still watched the game on Sundays, still talked on the phone. But something fundamental had shifted. There was a carefulness now, a self-editing to our conversations. We didn't talk about the future the way we used to. We didn't talk about anything that really mattered. Our friendship, once an open-ended exploration, had become a well-rehearsed play. He was wonderful to Sarah. He treated her like a sister, always remembering her birthday, asking about her projects at work, making her laugh with his dry wit. She adored him. I love that my husband's best friend is one of my best friends too, she'd often say. It makes everything so easy. That was the word for it. It was all too easy to maintain the fiction. About 6 months after the wedding, the first real crack appeared. It was a Tuesday night. I'd had a brutal day in court, losing a case I thought I should have won. I came home exhausted and irritable, wanting nothing more than to pour a whiskey and stare at a wall. I walked in to find Alex and Sarah in the kitchen laughing. They were trying to follow a complicated recipe from a YouTube video, and there was flour on Sarah's nose and a smear of tomato sauce on Alex's cheek. The scene was so domestically charming, so painfully normal, it felt like a punch to the gut. They looked like the couple. I felt like the intruder in my own home. "Hey," Sarah said, her face lighting up when she saw me. "You're home early. Look, Alex is teaching me how to make his famous bolognese." Teaching is a strong word. Alex chimed in, grinning at me. "It's more like a controlled demolition." "How was court?" "Fine," I clipped, shrugging off my coat and dropping my briefcase by the door with a thud that was louder than necessary. I went straight to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a drink, forgoing a glass. The laughter in the kitchen died. I could feel their eyes on my back. "Rough day?" Alex asked, his voice losing its jovial edge. "You could say that," I said, taking a long swallow of whiskey. The burn did nothing to ease the knot of anger in my stomach. Anger at the judge, at myself, at the world. Anger that they could be so happy and easy in my kitchen while I felt like I was suffocating. "Well, dinner's almost ready," Sarah said, her voice gentle, trying to smooth over my mood. "Why don't you go change and relax for a bit?" "I'm not hungry," I said, turning to face them. The hurt in her eyes was immediate and sharp. "Oh, okay. Well, there's plenty for leftovers." An awkward silence descended. Alex wiped the sauce from his cheek with the back of his hand, his expression unreadable. He was watching me, his gaze analytical. He knew this wasn't just about a bad day at work. He knew me too well. "I should probably get going," he said, untying the apron Sarah had made him wear. "Let you guys have your evening." "No, stay," Sarah insisted, a little too quickly. "We made so much. Please, Alex." She didn't want to be left alone with me. The realization was another turn of the knife. "Nah, I got an early morning," he said, giving her a quick, one-armed hug. He walked over to me. "See you Sunday for the game." I just nodded, taking another drink. He clapped my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt condescending. "Hang in there, man," he said, his voice low for my ears. Only after he left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Sarah began quietly cleaning up the kitchen, her movements small and deliberate. She wouldn't look at me. "What was that about?" she finally asked, her back still to me. "I told you, I had a bad day." "No," she said, turning around, her face etched with a mixture of hurt and frustration I'd never seen before. "That was more than a bad day. Brad, you walked in here and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. You were rude to me, and you were rude to Alex." "I wasn't rude." "Yes, you were. You dismissed me, and you basically pushed your best friend out the door. What is going on with you?" "Nothing is going on. I'm just tired," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. Tears welled in her eyes. "Why do you do that?" she whispered. "Why do you shut down? Sometimes I feel like there's this whole other part of you that I'm not allowed to see. It's like there's a wall around you, and every time I get close, you just make it higher." Her words hit their mark with surgical precision. She was seeing the cracks. She was feeling the echo in the hallway, the cold draft from the space I kept locked away. I didn't know what to say. The truth was a grenade that would destroy everything her happiness. Our home, the life I'd so carefully, so cowardly constructed. So I did what I always did. I lied. I apologized. I blamed it on stress from work. I pulled her into my arms and held her, stroking her hair and murmuring all the right things. I promised to be better, to talk more, to let her in. She eventually softened, forgiving me as I knew she would, because she loved me, because she believed in me. Later that night, as she slept beside me, I felt the full weight of my deception. I had not only hurt her, but I had used my love for Alex as a weapon against her. The anger and frustration I couldn't direct at myself or at him. I had let splash onto her. I looked at her sleeping face, so full of trust, and I felt a wave of self-loathing so profound it made me nauseous. The wall she felt wasn't just to keep her out, it was to keep him in. It was a prison I had built for my own heart, and I was realizing, with dawning horror, that I had locked her inside it with me. Asterisk, the wall Sarah had spoken of grew higher and thicker in the months that followed. My apology had been a temporary patch on a structural flaw, and the cracks were beginning to show again, spiderwebbing through the foundation of our marriage. I became a master of deflection, an artist of the half-truth. I buried myself in work, taking on the most complex, time-consuming cases at the firm. Long hours became my alibi, fatigue my excuse. It was easier to be an exhausted husband than a fraudulent one. Sarah tried. God, she tried. She planned date nights, suggested weekend getaways, and bought self-help books with titles like 7 Steps to a More Connected Marriage that she would leave on my nightstand. Each attempt was a small, painful reminder of my failure. She was trying to build a bridge to an island I had no intention of letting her land on. Our conversations became minefields of unspoken words. The space between us in bed felt like a canyon. We were roommates who shared a last name. My relationship with Alex suffered a similar, slow erosion. Our time together became strained. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a cautious politeness. He saw what was happening. He'd look from my drawn face to Sarah's forced smile, and a shadow of something pity, frustration, regret would cross his features. He stopped coming over for impromptu dinners. Our phone calls grew shorter. Our Sunday game-watching sessions punctuated by long, heavy silences. He was pulling away, respecting the boundary of my marriage, even as that marriage was crumbling from the inside out. He was being a good friend, and I had never hated him more for it. The breaking point came on a rainy Saturday in October, nearly 2 years after our wedding. It was our anniversary weekend. Sarah had made reservations at a fancy downtown restaurant, the kind of place you have to book months in advance. I'd forgotten. I'd agreed to help a junior associate at the firm move into his new apartment. A flimsy excuse I'd concocted at the last minute because the thought of a romantic, celebratory dinner felt like a special kind of torture. I came home late, smelling of stale pizza and rain, to find Sarah sitting on the sofa in the dark. She was still in her work clothes. The reservation had been for 8. It was nearly 10. Sarah? I said, flipping on the light. I'm so sorry. I totally lost track of time. Steve's elevator was out and, don't, Brad, she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. It was more terrifying than if she'd been screaming. Just don't. She stood up and walked over to the hallway table, picking up a framed photo. It was our wedding picture, the one of the two of us, beaming, just after the ceremony. She stared at it for a long moment. I was so happy that day, she said, her voice a whisper. I thought it was the beginning of my life, our life. She looked up from the photo, and her eyes, when they met mine, were clear and cold. The hurt had finally burned away, leaving behind a hard, desolate clarity. Who were you marrying that day, Brad? Was it me? The question hung in the air, sharp and lethal as a shard of glass. This was it, the moment of truth I had been running from my entire adult life. What are you talking about? I deflected, my heart pounding a frantic, panicked rhythm. I went to see Alex today, she said, and my blood ran cold. I had to. I thought I was going crazy. I thought this was my fault. I thought I wasn't pretty enough or smart enough or enough. I needed to ask him what I was doing wrong. Why my husband looks at me like I'm a stranger. I couldn't breathe. What did he say? A single, bitter tear traced a path down her cheek. He didn't have to say anything. I told him how lost I felt. I told him how you were disappearing before my very eyes. And you know what he did, Brad? He defended you. He made excuses for you. Stress from work, the pressure of the new promotion, the whole tired script. But the way he looked when he said your name, the pain in his eyes, It was the same pain I see in yours. Only he's not hiding it as well as you do." She put the photo down on the table with a soft, final click. "It's him, isn't it? It's always been him. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact." She had solved the puzzle. She had seen the man behind the curtain. And in that moment, seeing the truth reflected in her eyes, the entire, elaborate structure of my life collapsed. The walls came down, the lies turned to dust, and all that was left was the raw, pathetic, undeniable truth. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, a slow, agonizing movement. It was the most honest thing I had done in 2 years. Her face crumpled, the dam of her composure finally breaking. But her sobs were quiet, exhausted. The fight was over. All this time, she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. All this time, I'd been a placeholder, a role you cast because you were too afraid to live your own life. She looked at me, a deep, profound pity in her gaze. "You didn't just lie to me, Brad. You lied to him, and you lied to yourself. I'm the one with the ring, but all 3 of us are in this prison you built." She was right. In my cowardice, I had not only broken her heart, I had broken his and my own. I had chosen a life of quiet desperation over a moment of difficult honesty. There was nothing left to say. The wreckage of our marriage lay around us in the quiet apartment. That night, she slept in the guest room. The next morning, she was gone. A note was on the kitchen counter next to her wedding ring. It was short and devastatingly kind. "I hope you find the courage to be happy. You both deserve it." As I stood there for a long time, the ring cold and heavy in my palm, the silence in the apartment was absolute. It wasn't the absence of noise. It was the presence of emptiness. I was alone, truly alone. For the first time in my life, I spent the next few days in a fog, walking through the hollow shell of my life. The apartment was haunted by Sarah's absence, the empty space in the closet, the missing coffee mug, the indentation on her side of the sofa. Every object was a monument to my deceit. Finally, I knew what I had to do. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Harder than saying I do. Harder than lying to Sarah every single day. I drove to Alex's apartment. It was late, the same time of night I'd shown up on his doorstep 100 times before. After a bad day or a good one, for no reason other than to be near him, I stood outside his door for a full 5 minutes, my hand raised to knock, my heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest. What if he slammed the door in my face? What if he hated me? He had every right to. I finally knocked. The door opened and he was there. He looked tired, older than his years. His eyes were red-rimmed. He'd clearly been waiting for me. He knew. She told me she was leaving. He said, his voice raspy. He didn't invite me in. He just stood there, blocking the doorway, a guardian of his own shattered heart. "Alex." My voice broke. The words I'd rehearsed, the apology I'd constructed, it all evaporated. All that was left was the raw, unvarnished truth. "I'm sorry. For everything. For being a coward. For wasting so much time. For hurting you. For hurting her." He just stared at me, his face a mask of stone. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I deserved this. I deserved his anger, his hatred, his silence. "Why, Brad?" he finally asked, his voice cracking on my name. "After all these years, why couldn't you just talk to me?" Because I was scared, I whispered, the admission feeling like a confession at the gallows. I was terrified of what it would mean. For us, for me. I saw a life that looked right, that looked easy, and I took it. I thought I could make it work. I thought I could pretend long enough for it to become real. And was it? He asked, his voice laced with a bitterness I had never heard from him before. Was it easy? It was hell, I said, tears finally streaming down my face, hot and shameful. Every single day was hell, because the only real thing in my life was you, and I was pretending you weren't. The stone in his expression began to crack. He leaned his forehead against the door frame, closing his eyes. He looked broken. I had done this. My fear had broken the strongest person I had ever known. The night before the wedding, he said, his voice muffled, "I almost told you not to do it. I almost begged you to just run away with me. Just get in the car and drive." "Why? Didn't you?" I choked out. He looked up, his blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Because I saw the look on your face. You were terrified, but you were determined. You had made your choice, and because I love you. I wanted you to be happy, even if it wasn't with me." He shook his head slowly. "That was my mistake, thinking you could be happy living a lie." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the opposite wall of the hallway, mirroring him. We were two sides of the same tragedy, separated by a few feet of empty space that held 15 years of unspoken feelings. "I love you," I said, the words finally free, finally real. They felt like both a wound and a bomb. "I'm in love. With you, Alex. I think I have been since we were 20 years old." He let out a shuddering breath, a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He pushed himself off the doorframe and took a step towards me, closing the impossible distance. He stopped right in front of me, searching my face as if seeing it for the first time. "You're an idiot, Brad Peterson," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I know," I said. He reached up, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second. Before cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my tear-stained cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of pure, unadulterated truth. It was everything I had ever wanted. "So what now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I looked at him, at the man I had loved my whole life, the man I had betrayed, the man who had waited for me even when he didn't know he was waiting. I looked at the wreckage around us, the hearts we had to mend, the long road ahead. It wouldn't be easy, it would be complicated and messy, but for the first time, it would be real. I leaned in and rested my forehead against his. "Now," I said, my voice shaking with the terrifying, exhilarating weight of a future I finally had the courage to choose, "we begin."